Everybody, and welcome to the Supreme Madden 24 Rules Clinic and Rules Refresher. This Rules Clinic will be simple and hopefully quick. The purpose of this Rules Clinic is to explain the current rules while also explaining some of the changes that we have made for the current rule book and some of the new ways that we are implementing about punishing rule breakers. This past season was a great season. We had a great cycle for Madden, and we're thankful for that, and we're grateful for that. But we believe things got a little laxed when it comes to punishments and penalties. People kind of skirted around the rules a little bit in ways that we don't want our league to be known for. And so we're going to be getting back to normal, what we consider normal, and that is enforcing strict policies on our rules, not unfair policies, but strict policies. And so this rules clinic will help you maybe avoid some of the penalties that come along with some of the issues that come with breaking a rule. But with that being said, let's get started. As you can see on the screen right now, there is a snapshot of our current rules server, or of our server, the current rulebook section in our server. And as you can see on the screen, something that's different than this previous Madden cycle is you're going to see a white circle next to a handful of these rules and these sections of these rules. And you may be asking what that's for. And so I'm going to explain what those are for right now. As you can see on the screen, there's a graphic, and you can see that it says these are rules that count as offenses. So those rules with the white circles next to them are sportsmanship, general gameplay, offensive gameplay, defensive gameplay, sub linebacker requirements, position changes, streaming, and trades. And the reason that you are seeing a white circle next to them is because if you break any of the rules in those sections, that will be considered an offense. Now, I said earlier that we are going to be fair in how we implement rules, punishments for rule breaks and things like that. If we deem a rule break to be unreasonable, if we deem a rule break to be purposeful, if we deem a rule break to be malicious, or if we just deem a rule break to be completely just something that you chose to do and ignore the rule altogether, we will issue an offense, and we will be keeping a record all season long of the offenses, not just season, but Madden cycle. When I say season and cycle, I interchange those sometimes. So we will be seeing that. So with that being said, you may ask, well, what does an offense do? And what's the purpose of having those white circles and having things count as an offense? As you can see on the screen right now, there is a player dismissal chart. This is new, and this is something that's going to be implemented for the Madden 24 Supreme cycle. As you can see, the first time that you break one of those rules in those categories, it will count as an offense. And that will be your first offense. And there will be also punishments that come along with those offenses as well. However, we'll get to that in just a few moments about punishments and things like that. But the first offense, you are in the first offense category. In the second offense, you're in the second offense category. If you break a rule in one of those sections for the third time, you are officially placed on probation. And if you break a rule in one of those sections, once again, you are dismissed automatically from Supreme Madden. And I want to let everyone know that no one's exempt from this, myself. And you say, well, there wouldn't be a league without a commissioner. Eli, there's no exemption for Eli. None of the Hall of Fame members, and we'll be inducting a couple more Hall of Fame members in a few seasons. They won't be exempt. Any of our union members, they're not exempt. No long-term OG members are exempt. Everyone in this league will abide by the rule book, and everyone will be subject to dismissal if the rules are broken. So please make sure you note and you get very familiar with the rule book. You say, I don't know if they will actually follow through. I promise you, I am at a point, and so is Eli. We've discussed this a lot over the past couple of seasons as we finished up Madden 23. We're kind of to the point where we want to get back to the original Supreme, where things were about realism and about real football and proper football. So please just note, if you break any of the rules in the sections that I mentioned above, and I'll even go back now to that screen so that you can see once again what it is you're going to be having to deal with. It is sportsmanship rules, general gameplay rules, defensive gameplay rules, offensive gameplay rules, sub linebacker rules, position change rules, streaming rules, and trade rules. If you break rules in any of those four, or any of those, and you do it 4 times, you will be dismissed from the league. 3 times you're on probation. Probation means you're ineligible to win the prize, and that means that you cannot. You're ineligible to win the prize for the season that you go on probation and for the duration of the time that you're left in the league. So please note that this is very serious, but this is the integrity of the league at stake. So please make sure you note that. So with that being said, you say, well, what happens to our players if we break a rule that's on the offense list? And what happens to our players if we break a rule that's not on the offense list? And as you can see, there are rules that were not on the offense list. The fourth down rule, for example, backup running back rules, miscellaneous rules, and even roster movements, things like that. You say, well, what happens to players if we break rules and they're not on the offense list and they're not on any of those other categories? What if we just break a rule? What happens to a player? Well, you can see on the screen now there's a punishment chart that's being implemented. The first time you break any rule, it doesn't matter what rule it is, whether it's an offense rule or whether it's the fourth down rule or the backup running back carry rule, first time you break it, it will be a 1-game suspension for a player of the Supreme Madden Union's choosing, and it will usually be a quarterback, a best player, a best defensive player, depends on what side of the ball the rule break happens, and so forth, and obviously how bad the rule is. So you do it again, whether it's backup running back carry rule, whether it's the any of the offensive rules, any of it, any rule, it's 2-game suspension. You do it a third time, 4-game suspension. You say, well, don't we get suspended after a fourth break? Because on the fourth break, you can see it goes up to 6 games. Well, if you break any of the offense section rules, then yeah, you'd be dismissed. But let's say you break the fourth down rule for the 4th time. Well, guess what? That's 6-game suspension for a player. You do it a 5th time, it's 8-game suspension for a player, and you do it a 6th time, it's 10-game suspension. And let's say week 12, you decide that you're going to break the 4th down rule for the 7th time of the season. That will be a 1-season, 17-game suspension. You say, what? That means from week 12 of the week that you broke it, or the starting would be week 13. It'd be from that week 13 until the next week 13. And it does count as games played, not just sim games and things of that sort. So please note, this is the new punishment chart that we're going to be running with. It will be posted in the server in different locations throughout, so that you can see it and kind of remember what it is we saw. So let's look at each of these individual rule sections very quickly together, and let's discuss what it is that we have to do. The first section is the league info section, and that's just basic, same, everything's normal, 48-hour advance. We obviously advance sometimes quicker in here because the games are played quicker, and that will just depend on activity, and that's okay if we don't get it in. We're going to try to keep, especially the early seasons, we're going to try to keep it at 48 hours, and that way everybody has a real chance to schedule and make their games count and make their games played. So we're going to try to really stick to that 48-hour advance. Real up-to-date rosters. Obviously, we're going to start when Madden 24 drops. Hopefully there's no big roster or no big game update that we have to wait on like we did last year until September or October. We're playing on all Madden difficulty again. Sim-style gameplay. 7-minute quarters are still the same, and X Factor and Superstar abilities are turned off once again. I know that I had a few people DM me and ask if we had ever considered changing that rule. That is not something that we've ever considered changing. That's exactly what this league was founded for, was to get away from the abilities. And there's various reasons for that. We also have our regression system, once again, that we've designed, and it'll be tweaked based on the year, or the game cycle, I should say. And then finally, our rule book, which is to ensure realistic gameplay. Let's move over to the sportsmanship section of the rule book. We permit trash talking. You guys know that. I don't have a problem with trash talking, and no one in here should. It's encouraged. It's fun. It makes things exciting. But we ask that you don't cross the line. There are certain things that you should just never talk about with people and talk about in the sense of in a critical way. And you should never be insulting of someone's religion, their race, their family. You shouldn't attack them personally, the way they look, the way they talk, the way they sound, like that. You should just be respectful. Be a man. Don't be a kid. Don't be a little high school age kid who just insults someone based on those things because they know it gets a kick out of their friends used to get a kick out of it, or it really, you're trying to sting somebody. Just be a man and do things the right way. So please make sure that you handle things correctly. Crossing the line, as you can see in the italics in this area, will result in an automatic dismissal from our league. We won't accept it. It's not permitted. If you do it, I'll DM you and tell you we're getting ready to boot you. You've crossed this line, so forth. No quitting. You're not allowed to quit a game, period. Unless there is an emergency that happens in the game, you're playing, your house catches on fire, you're playing, you get a call that something's happened or someone's in trouble in your family and you have to rush out the door. That's understandable. But if you're losing, you're upset at the game, you're mad at your opponent, and you just quit the game, that is unacceptable, and that will count as an offense, obviously. It will result in a penalty. You do it multiple times, you'll quit. You have quitting, you'll result in being dismissed from the league. I will also add that quitting also means that you just quit playing. You just start diving after air when instead of trying to tackle players, you're down 28-0 and you're mad at the game. So you just start letting people score and you just start throwing up trash to try to throw in, or just throw the ball deep just because you're mad at the game. That is quitting as well. We don't want you to quit literally, and we don't want you to quit figuratively. So please play the entirety of your games and don't quit out. Don't concede. Okay. We also see in this rule book that it says conceding is allowed in the second half, and you're allowed to do that. If you get into the second half of a game and you're getting just demolished and whatnot, you're allowed to concede, but there has to be a 28-point spread. You have to be down 28 plus, and you have to ask your opponent. If your opponent says, no, I don't want you to concede, I'd like to keep playing, then you have to play the game and you have to play it realistically. So please just note that. That's the rule. If you concede at any time and it does not meet any of the above requirements, you will be penalized, and then multiple offenses will result in the dismissal from the league. Here's a big one that a lot of people seem to get in trouble with, and not just this league, but in every league that I'm in. People just don't pay attention. You are not allowed to run up the score. And here's what we define as running up the score. When you are up 28 points, you have to do the following things. There's no ifs, ands, or ors about it. You have to do this. You have to run the football. If you score on the run play, that's fine. You can't control that, but you have to run the football. And when you run the football and you're up 28, you have to chew clock. Chew clock has to be on. Turn on the button at the bottom, double click R3 or whatever it is, and turn on chew clock. When you intercept someone's pass and you're up 28, don't return that for a touchdown. Just fall to the ground. We don't care about your stats. We don't care about breakout games. We don't care about any of that. We want sportsmanship to be practiced in this league. So make sure you follow that. Passing while up 28 points or passing late in a game where the game is completely decided, it's over, you're just trying to just pad stats, that is not allowed, and that will be penalized. Once the score goes back under 28 points, so let's say you're up 28, they score, you're down to 21, you're up 21 now. You can go back to playing normal. But if you score, go back up 28, you have to start playing by the rule again that you can't run the ball or run the clock up. Run the score up. You have to run the ball and chew the clock. So please make sure you make a note that you cannot pass the ball while up 28. If it's a passing situation, maybe 3rd and 7, and you want to get the first down, you can pass in that situation. But if you're passing on 1st and 2nd down, I don't care if they're run committing. You cannot do that. Okay? So please make sure you note that. I want to add, too, that if you're down 28, when this kind of goes back to quitting, but you can't come out in crazy stuff like special teams punt block or something like that. Make sure you play realistically. So that's the 28 plus point rule. The next one, inactivity in your scheduling. Man, Madden 23 season, I think it was 5 this past season. Congratulations to Chris Dennis on winning the Super Bowl. But this past season was absolutely terrible for inactivity. I've never seen inactivity in Supreme like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with how bad Madden 23 was. But nonetheless, we are forbidding inactivity. You will be penalized, and if you continue to do it, you'll be dismissed. Please make sure your schedule. After 4 advances, I will check. If you haven't been scheduling, you're booted. If you've scheduled once or twice, you've not been active, you'll be added to the activity warning list. And if we check 10 more times and you've not done it over the course of the entire year, you're not coming off the inactivity list until the end of the year and the end of the season. And if you've fallen any way off the path and not communicating and not playing, you're booted. We're not going to be afraid to replace people this year because we really want this league to thrive. And it thrived for most of this past year, but this past season, the last season that we played was very difficult. We did way too many sims. You're not allowed to tank. I don't care if you are the worst team in the league and You need a quarterback. You're not allowed to tank. Play your games, play to win, be a man, and try to do the right thing, uh, even when your team is not very good. Even week 18 games, you cannot just quit week 18 games. You can't just say, I don't want to play because I don't have a chance in the playoffs. I don't care if you're a playoff team or not. You have to play your games. Don't tank. Here's a big one. You're not allowed to argue against league rules. I don't care, and Eli doesn't care if you don't like our rules. You're the one who is agreeing when you join this league to follow the rules. So please join and accept the rules and don't argue against them. You can ask me in a DM if you get a penalty for maybe playing. DM me if you want an explanation, and I'll give you an explanation. But don't come at me and try to argue it because I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to budge on that. I'm actually the opposite. When you fight me against things like that, when it's obvious, if you come at me real hot and heavy, I'm not one of those people who like to be backed into a corner. I come out swinging, so I'm not gonna. I'm usually pretty bullheaded. I'll not back down. But if you ask me, I'll look into it, and if it's wrong, guess what? I'll tell you I was wrong. I've done that before, so make sure that you realize that you can't argue against the rules. You do that, it's a penalty, and if you do it, it can be too many times. It can be dismissal from the league. Here's a new rule. One of the few new rules that we've added to this game cycle. It's named in honor of Cassie. The Cassie Leopega GG rule, and I like it. And I'm going to give him credit for it because he suggested it way back in February, and I should have listened to him then. But I'm going to add it now, and I think it's good. Me and Eli have talked about it, and we think it's a very positive rule to add. After a win or a loss, you must say GG to your opponent. You can have discussions about the game. You can discuss what happened, what went wrong, why you lost, why they won, etc. But you cannot talk about the game and make excuses. And I will raise my hand and say that I was the first one. I'll be the first one to admit I struggled with this terribly. I got so frustrated at Madden 23 that every time that I played it, and crazy things did happen. Sometimes it was not as bad as I was making it. Sometimes it was as bad as I was making it. But I would be like, this game sucks. This game's terrible, blah, blah. All that does is promote negativity. And I believe a lot of that negativity is why the last season was extremely bad for us here in Supreme. So please, no excuses. Don't get in the chat and be like, I hate this game. This game sucks. I lost because you ran the ball 25 times, and that's just there's no point in it. So let's just say GG, talk about the game, move on. And if you want to go vent to somebody, you can DM me and vent to me, I guess. But I'm not going to really, well, what is that going to do? It's not going to help you any. It's definitely not going to help me any. So please make sure that you note that sportsmanship rule. That's the sportsmanship rule. The next set of rules is our streaming rules. We had some problems with a few users with this. Streaming is required. You have to stream every single game that you play. And I know that there are a couple of you who have internet problems, and we are always willing to work with you on the internet issues. If you cannot stream a game and you let me know beforehand, hey, my internet's down, we'll accept that. But just know if someone accuses you of something and we can't check it out from your perspective, you're automatically guilty because I can't disprove it. So just know that streaming will help you have a fair chance if accused of anything. You will do all of your scheduling for your games. This is a streaming and scheduling issue. You'll do all of it in the game channel. Some of you were DMing in private, okay? I'm not going to crush you. Like, for example, Greg and Chris, best friends. They're DMing and they're talking, probably texting each other. I'm not going to crush y'all. I mean, that's you guys are friends. As long as you get the game played. Me and Eli talking private. I DM him on Facebook most of the time. So be it. Me and the Eagles user from this previous season, Joe Pimentel, we DM all the time. We run another league together, so we're talking. We schedule when we play. I get that. That's fine. But if that's not your relationship with the person, don't step outside the channel. If you don't know them, if you're not close to them, just keep it in the channels. That way we can monitor who's up. I'd say y'all couldn't play, and it comes down to I have to have the union vote on a fair sim or a force win. We can't see who's talking, who's not. You start sending me DMs. I won't accept the DMs this upcoming season. If you say, I deserve a force win, look at the DMs. I won't do it. If you haven't talked in the channel and you claim for a force win, it'll automatically be a fair sim. So please make sure you note that. Please make sure that you communicate in those channels. Please stream your games and place the stream in the proper channel. Here's looking at you, Pope. I had to say it. Sorry. Place it in the appropriate channel. We're always going to have the channel up and ready for you. Please place it in the appropriate channel. you have to, when you start scheduling your games, you've got to reach out within the first 24 hours to qualify for a force win. If you do not reach out within the first 24 hours, you will not be eligible for a force win. I don't care if you hit them up the whole entire second day and they didn't respond. That's not going to be a force win because you did not reach out within the first 24 hours. If you fail to do so and your opponent does, you will be eligible to receive a force loss if the game does not get played. When scheduling, it is best to set a time. I always come into the chats and say, hey, set a time. That way, you're putting someone's feet to the fire, and you can't just say, hey, well, we're supposed to play tonight, but he never hit me up. That's not really grounds for a force win, in my opinion. You need to put their feet to the fire, set something in stone. That way, you're responsible. They're responsible to be there at a certain time. You miss a time, you lose the game. That's basically the way I see it. You miss the time that you said, yeah, I'll play at 6. I don't care what happens. There's things that happen. If you cannot get that game played, the force win always will go to the person who did not miss the time. So that would be very important for you to know. Make sure that you understand that. You got to stream both users. I've just said that a few moments ago. You have to have your broadcast settings set to save all of broadcast. If you are streaming from Twitch, hear me, go to YouTube right now and look up how to save streams. If I go to a YouTube or I go to a Twitch account and they are not there, you're penalized. I won't even give you a warning like I did last year. You have to save your streams. Twitch is bad for that. I get it. Go to YouTube. It's easy to do a YouTube account. If not, figure out a way to get them saved. They have to be saved. And we like to go back and use footage sometimes for videos. And hopefully I have some time on my hands to make some videos this upcoming year. Your stream must always be posted in the proper weekly streaming channel and this is one that we never have enforced, but we're going to. You have to put the name of your opponent in the title of the stream. So let's say that, for example, I was the Lions. I'm playing Greg, who was the Ravens. I have to put Supreme versus Ravens, okay, or Lions versus Ravens. I have to put the name of the league, Supreme, Lions versus Ravens, or Supreme just versus Ravens. I have to have that in there. That helps us find streams when we go back and look for it. Please do that. Make our lives just a little bit easier. Let's go over to general gameplay. The entire premise of this league is to play realistic NFL football, and anything that violates this premise will not be tolerated, and it will be resulting in a penalty or dismissal from the league. Absolutely no cheesing of any kind. I saw some cheese this previous cycle. I saw some cheese, especially in this last season and some of the games I played. If your strategy comes off the internet and that strategy is designed to manipulate the game, if that strategy comes from YouTube, if that strategy comes from My Ultimate Team, Mutt, if it's what you read as from an ebook, if that's what you've learned is the meta, that's cheese. You cannot cheese. Now, I get it. You say, I didn't know that throwing an aggressive pass to the tight end or trying to aggressive catch for the tight end was meta. I get that. That's part of the game. You can't really, some of that's fringe. But if we see you throwing that aggressive pass every single play or 15 times or 10 times or even 6, 7 times or in crucial moments, that's a penalty. If you're running schemes from YouTube, that's a penalty. If you're cheesing, you will be punished. I'm tired of the cheese. It's going to be punished this year. So just buckle up and get ready for it. As of right now, the high pass meta will not be allowed. We don't know what 24 is going to look like with high passes. So until we find out whether or not the high pass is fixed, then we're not going to allow it until then. So high passes are not allowed. You cannot high pass at the beginning of 24, and we'll wait a few weeks before we change that or whatnot. Custom playbooks. Had a few people do this past year. Custom playbooks on offense and defense are not allowed. You cannot use a custom playbook. Here it goes back to our streaming. You have to show your playbook before the game. If you do not, and someone tells on you, I hate to say it like that, like a little kid, if someone rats on you or knocks you, guess what? It's a penalty. I don't care if you weren't even using a custom. If you didn't show your playbook, it is a penalty. So make sure you're showing it. Playbooks, we had this happen as well. Playbooks such as run and gun, multiple defense, other books like that, they're not allowed. So make sure that you're not using them. You got to use a stock team playbook. Just as always, there's a 3-play limit and a 3-play cooldown. So make sure that you note that. And here's another one that I saw a few times last year. No scum kicking. I get it if your internet lags. I get that. But dude, that happens occasionally. But if I'm seeing it once a game, every game, that's the problem there. Don't scum kick. That's when you sky kick it with a certain amount of power to the tight end or fullback, the ump back, and it promotes an easier chance for you to hit stick and force them to fumble. Make sure you're not doing that. Make sure that you are kicking it off. Offensive gameplay. On offense, you got to mix up your formations and concepts. Every one of us get into a habit of where we like to run 6, 7 plays. Open up the playbook, run every play that you can. That's what those playbooks are so big and open for. Run different formations. You can't stay in trips tight end bunch or trips bunch tight end or whatever it's called, or trips bunch all game. You can't just go to trips bunch every time you need a first down. You can't just go to I form slot every time that you want to run the football. You got to mix it up. Run every single formation. Run all the plays that you can. Mix it up, both your formations and the concepts. So I run a different plays, but if you're running an in, slant, crosser, in route, every play, you're running crossers. That's basically all that is. If you're running corner routes every single play, if you're running nothing but streaks every play, if you're running all stretch all game long, if you're running 26 times a game, but you're running 22 stretch runs, even though they're different sides and they're actually different, play forms or play arts, it's still stretch. Make sure you are changing up that. Make sure you're changing up your passing scheme. Be balanced on what you're calling and what you say. Well, we can't cheese if there's a 3-play limit and cooldown. You can still, spam. You can still spam different formations. You can still spam play types. You can still spam play concepts. Make sure you are mixing it up. Route combos, hot routes, run schemes. Just another one. You can't just run from shotgun all game. You got to get under the center and run some. Run and mix it up. Run under center runs, run the powers, run the traps, run stretch, run dive. Go to base from gun, go to base, go to inside zone, go to power, go to counter. Just run every run play that you can. Don't just fall in love with one run and do it. Hike and haul, once again, that's instant rollout. It's not allowed. If you snap the ball and you instantly take off, that's a penalty. Rollouts are allowed when it's part of the play design, like a play action boot play, or the pocket collapses, or you're sliding up the pocket or out of the pocket, and there's pressure around you. You can take off, but you can't just snap it and run instantly. So make sure that you don't do that. QB design runs are permitted. Scrambling with your QB is permitted, but if you scramble excessively or unrealistically, it will result in a penalty. So make sure that you don't abuse it. Motion glitching is not allowed. All wide receivers have to be set before snapping the ball. Normally we talk about that when it comes to running routes. You can't motion snap and let someone run a quicker or better route, but it also means that you can't. There's a new one that was in the game this past year, motion blocking, where if you snap it before they cross the offensive line, they become an extra blocker and they get like unreal blocking. You can't do that either, so make sure they're set. We allowed this. This was a conversation that happened quite a few times last year. People didn't realize it. I guess you didn't read the rule book as clearly as you needed to. Playmaker was allowed for Madden 23, and it's going to be allowed on Madden 24. But you can't spam it. You can't abuse it. If you do, it'll be a punishment. If you're playmaker and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game, you're spamming it. Once or twice. I think I've seen people use it on me like once a game. If you're using it 5, 6, 7 times, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it just depends. Really, if we go back and watch and we see a pattern, he's playmaker 3, 4, 5, 6 times every game. You're falling in love with it. Make sure that you don't do that. Okay, so please make sure that you don't do that. Hurry up is allowed as always. You can only use it once before you have to huddle. So you no huddle, run your play, then you have to huddle. The only time that you can run no huddle without having to huddle, and it's not considered illegal, is when it's late in the second quarter, late in the fourth quarter, or when you're trailing in the second half. So make sure that you do that. You cannot chew or kill clock unless you're up 28 points or you're under 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. If you're chewing clock in the third quarter because you're up and you're trying to get the game up, you cannot do that. If it's 6 minutes in the fourth, you have to wait until it's 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter before you can start chewing clock. So make sure that you're following that rule. Spamming, force feeding a player is what we're calling it. It's illegal. We had some of that happen this previous season. We had some conversations about it in our chat. Let's not do it. If we're looking and we see that you've got one receiver with 2,300 yards and the rest of them are 800, 900. You got one other that's like 800, but the rest of them are like 200. You're not spreading the ball around. This game allows certain players to just beast. We get it, and we understand that, but you shouldn't always look to them. It is capable to spread the ball around to multiple targets. Do so. Don't just have every one of them with 25 touchdowns, or one player with 25 touchdowns, no one else with a touchdown, and all those yards and no one else with yards. So make sure you're doing the proper thing there. High passing, I said it earlier, but it's banned. Quick passing, we banned this at the end of last year, still saw it happening, even in playoff games. It's got to be banned. It's ridiculous, especially if the game stays in the current state that it's in. Your QB cannot pass off the snap. If you snap it and hit X and throw it, that's illegal. You cannot instantly throw to the running back as soon as the ball snapped. You cannot instantly throw to the seam route. That's the one that kills me. That was the one that was complained about the most. Everybody was DMing me about that. Like, oh, they're throwing the seam route every time, and they're right. I mean, it was open almost every time, and no matter what adjustment you made, it just didn't affect it. And without like abilities on where you can have like a mid route KO, it didn't really. There's no hope for it. So you have to make sure you're not throwing that quick route. I don't care if you snap it, take one step on the drop back and see that it's open. You have to wait till your drop back is complete. If it's under center, it's at least 3 steps. Under shotgun, it's at least 2 to 4 steps, 5 steps. Sometimes, obviously it depends on the play. I don't think you're necessarily going to do a 5-step drop from the gun, but you get what I'm saying. Make sure that you understand that you cannot quick pass. Make sure you're following the rule. Next on the list, defensive gameplay. And we're starting to get a little quicker here because these are a little bit more simple, but they're important. You got to mix up your coverages. You have to use all coverages. You have to use cover 1. You have to use cover 2. You have to use, I label cover 1 and man coverage the same. So you have to use man coverage. You have to use cover 2. You have to use cover 3. You have to use cover 4. You have to use cover 6. You have to. And always remember that cover 3 flats, hard flats, is still the same as cover 3 seams. I know that it's different in the responsibilities of certain players and their coverage areas, but it's still a cover 3 shell over the top. Cover 3 is cover 3. Mix it up. Had some people not doing that last year. Make sure you're mixing it up. Make sure you're mixing up your blitzing. How often you blitz. You shouldn't be spamming the blitz and be blitzing 60% of your game. That's crazy, especially when you know it's meta. Don't run the same blitz every time. Don't run man blitz. Don't run zone blitz every single time. Mix it up. Mix up which blitzes you're doing. If Overstorm Brave is still broken next year, it'll be banned. We're going to start banning certain blitzes that we're seeing that are just completely crazy. So make sure that you understand that as well. Mix up your formations. You cannot stay in nickel 3-3-5 wide. You cannot stay in dollar, and you cannot stay in a 4-3 or a 3-4. You can't stay in it all game. Mix up your formations. Mix up the formations, and you always have to have one linebacker on the field alongside of a sub linebacker. Let's say you're in nickel or dime or dollar, and you have a sub linebacker that meets our requirements and our sub linebacker requirements that we're going to talk about in a few moments. You have to have a linebacker next to him. There has to be a linebacker on the field at all times when it comes to these formations that allow sub linebackers. I know there are certain formations that allow corners into the box. Like I know the Ravens defensive playbook had that. That is still, we can't really enforce that very much. But if we see it and we see that it's a problem, it may be addressed in a future announcement coming up. You have to rush 3 players at all times. Didn't really have a problem with that this year. Everybody kind of understood it. You have to have at least 3 people rush the quarterback at all times. Please do not spam meta defenses or meta formations. Now let's talk about our sub linebacker requirements. This is one of those things that I really like, and I think it really makes our league a little different from other leagues. We do allow certain safeties to play in the box, and we allow them to play in nickel and dime and dollar and things like that. But they got to meet these requirements. Last year, we only made them weigh 205 pounds. We went down from 210 to 205. We're going to go up. We're moving it to 215 pounds because here's the reality of the matter. There's not many safeties that play in the box, and there's not safeties that play in the box every play. So we want linebackers to actually mean something in our league. We want linebackers to be important. So if you have a safety and he is 215 pounds, he is eligible to play if he also has a hit power rating of 75 plus, if his speed is 93 or lower, and if his change of direction is 90 or lower. Those are the sub linebacker requirements for safeties. All natural linebackers, whether it's a middle linebacker or an outside linebacker, all of those linebackers can still play the sub linebacker. They're always accepted, but safeties have to follow those requirements. Now let's talk about a big one. This is the one that we've changed the most, and this is the one that I think is very important that we explain. We changed our position change rule. Position changes are monitored. Not only are we getting on transaction lists, but also because of Neon Sports and Discord, it allows us to see changes when they're made. It updates us when it does that. So we are monitoring it from now on. If you are wanting to if you're wanting to change someone's position, let's say you draft a player and you want to change his position, you have to DM me or Eli. You have to DM me or Eli, or you have to DM an admin. And our admins for this upcoming season are Cassie and Will. You have to DM one of them, and then we'll talk about it. And if it doesn't meet our requirements, then no, you're not allowed to do it. You should never ask to change a quarterback's position. I don't care if he runs 95 speed and he's not very good at throwing. He's quarterback. You can't change his position. Wide receivers, you cannot change a wide receiver's position. They can't play running back. They can't play fullback. They can't play tight end. They can't play safety or corner. They have to play wide receiver if they're a wide receiver. Tight ends cannot be changed to any position. You can play a tight end at fullback, but you cannot change his position to fullback. You can only put him at fullback on the depth chart. If you change his position, it's an illegal change, and it's a penalty, and it's an offense because this is an offensible penalty. You cannot change running backs to any position. They have to remain a running back. Okay? You have to remain a running back. You cannot this year play a H-back at fullback. H-back to fullback are not allowed. We have allowed that in times past, but people were starting to put 95, 96, 97 speed running backs at fullback and hit fullback dives, and it was crazy what it was doing. So we're not going to allow that. Only fullbacks can play fullback. Only H-backs can play H-back, and so forth. So make sure that you or H-backs can't play fullback, so make sure that you note that. You can change, like, for example, on the offensive line, you can change a left guard to a right guard, or you can change a left tackle to a right tackle, okay? So, like, in the position group, it is allowed to be changed. So, like, if you draft a left tackle and you want to change his position to right tackle, that is acceptable. If you draft a center and say, I want to change him to guard, you cannot change him to guard. He has to remain a center. If you draft a left guard and you want to change him to right guard, that's acceptable. If you draft a left guard and want to change him to left tackle, that is not acceptable. Okay? So tackle to tackle is fine. Guard to guard is fine. Guard to tackle is not fine. Guard to center is not fine, or center to tackle is not fine, and so forth. An offensive lineman can still play those positions. If you want to start your right guard at center, you can do that. That is perfectly fine, as long as it's on the depth chart, and as long as it's one of the approved situations that we see in the list above. A player position change is not required for you to do that. You don't have to go and edit the player and go change his position from center to guard to play him at guard. You just move it on the depth chart. Okay, so make sure you do that. If you draft a right tackle and you want him to be a left tackle, go for it. You can change it. If you draft a right tackle and say, I'd rather him be a right guard, you cannot change his position. Just change it on the depth chart. Make sure you're listening. Corners. You cannot change a corner into safety. We've never allowed it, and nor will we ever allow it. Safeties cannot be changed into corners. Okay? But you can play a corner at safety, at free safety or strong safety, and you can play a safety as a corner, but it has to be on the depth chart. You can't go in and change their position. Make sure you note that. Linebackers. Here's the one that's what triggered the rule. Linebackers cannot have position changes made to them. So, like, for example, you cannot change a middle linebacker to a right end. You can't change a outside linebacker to a defensive end. And the reason for that is that there's like a thing where if you change your outside linebacker who's a 97 to a defensive end, he doesn't ask for as much money in contract negotiations, which allows you to spend more. And also their development's affected, the overall status of your team's affected. You can play your left outside linebacker as a pass rushing DN, but you can't change his position to it. He has to remain an outside linebacker. Make sure that you do not change your linebacker's position to other linebacker positions or defensive line position. If you want to play your outside linebacker at middle linebacker, he can do that, but you can't change him to a middle linebacker. If you want to change your right outside linebacker to your left outside linebacker, you can do that. That's an acceptable permission change, as you see the green check mark. But you cannot do it, or you cannot change a outside linebacker to a middle linebacker, or an outside linebacker to a defensive end or a defensive tackle. If you want to do those, it has to be on the depth chart. So make sure that you're paying attention to those throughout the year. Trades, we've got a pretty good trade system in place. You guys didn't abuse it really badly last year, so we're very thankful for that. You can only offer one trade per week. You can only offer one counter trade per week to any trade that may end up being disapproved by our players union. The trade and the counter trade has to include the original key piece of the trade. Example, you're offering Malik Willis from the Tennessee Titans. He's the key piece of the trade. You're offering it for a second-round pick. We think, oh no, the union thinks, oh no, it's not a acceptable trade. It needs to be a third-round pick. And then you send back okay, I've got a counter. You send back and it's Ryan Tannehill for a second. That's not the same trade. That's a new trade. You have to go back to the original and offer a counter based on it. So make sure you do that. You can't trade with the CPU. You're only allowed to have 5 trades per season, 3 in the regular season and 2 in the off season. There are always going to be certain players that are considered foundational pieces, and that is decided upon by our players' union. And so that's the way that is. You cannot trade first and second round rookies in their first year, and you cannot permit or you cannot send a trade in unless it is of a trade screen. We will be enforcing that strongly. It has to be on a trade screen on the Madden video game, not from Neon, but on Madden. Make sure that you understand that. That way we can see the players, and then go look on Neon and look it up. So that's our trade rule. Our fourth down rule stays the same. You can go for it on fourth anytime when it's 4th and 2 or less. You can go for it on fourth when it's 4th and 3 or more when you're past the 50-yard line. You can go for it any fourth down in the fourth quarter unless you're up 28 points or more. If you're trailing by 17, you can go for it on any fourth down at any time. Fake punts are only allowed once per game, regardless of yardage. Use it wisely. That is the fourth down rule. Backup running back rule stays the same. I know that's frustrated a lot of people last year. Trust me, it irritated me when I was having to punish it all the time because I was constantly having to check it. But we're trying to prevent running back ones from being spammed and winning all the normal yearly offensive awards. So there's this backup carry rule. It's easy. If you run the ball 10 times with your running back 1, or if you run the ball 10 times with your running back 2 or your running back 3, if you have a running back with 10 plus carries, you have to have a second running back or a second committee of running backs with at least 4 carries. That is not hard to do. Quarterback carries, wide receiver carries do not count as that. So please make sure you note that. You can get all 4 of those carries with one running back or with the host of running backs in the running back room. Easy to do. Let's go to our next one. Miscellaneous rules. Here's one that we've seen a few times. I saw it late. You can't go and line up in 5 wide, then audible down to under center. It does not allow the defense. Because when someone comes out in 5 wide, the only real way to defend 5 wide is to come out in dollar, and you get weak boxed when people do that. It's kind of a manipulative strategy for someone to come out in 5 wide, then audible down to like I-form slot or whatever you can audible into their strong, the strong package or whatever, and it does not allow you to make any real defensive changes that help you. So it does manipulate personnel. You cannot come out in 5 wide, audible to an under center set. In a unique scenario, when the last with the last play of the half or the last play of the game, which means like there's 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever left, you can. We actually got 5 seconds, so make sure you're following it. It's 5 seconds, and it's a fourth down. You can break the fourth down rule there because that fourth round rule doesn't count there. You can throw like a Hail Mary. You can't go for just a first down if it's under 5 seconds. Obviously the first down don't help you. You have to throw a Hail Mary if it's late in the game, late in the half, and you want to just try to throw it up for a touchdown. You can do that. You can take a shot at the end zone, but it's at your own risk because they can return it for a touchdown. You cannot change a player's name. If you draft, quarterback Devin Leary from Kentucky next year, and then you want to change his name to Pop Smoke or whatever, I don't know. You can't change it to that. Okay, and you said, why did you say Pop Smoke? We had a guy do that in the very first league I was in. He changed his receiver to some smoke and made his speed 99 and act like we weren't going to realize it. You can't do that. So make sure you don't change their names. You cannot give them outdated or unrealistic accessories. Don't go making your guys look like they're from the 60s. Make it realistic. And you cannot change the dominant hand or the throwing style of your quarterback. If your quarterback is a lefty, he has to stay a lefty. If he has the Scrambler 1 release, he has to stay with the Scrambler 1 release. So make sure that you are noting that. Finally, roster movements. As you can see right here, it's the same as it always has been. We do this to prevent roster dumping. 6 weekly movements. We never have really a problem with that. If you want to cut someone who's over 80, just DM one of us. We'll raise the cut restriction until you're done. Practice squad stealing from now on will always be turned on at week 4 instead of week 6. When the first season of the league begins, there will be free agents who are not on a team yet, and we will randomize an order in which players can pick that or we'll just have a free for all and let let a user only pick one free agent per or for that first week. It just depends on what we decide to do in that moment. And once again, first and second round rookies who are drafted cannot be traded in their year one of the franchise. So that is our rules clinic. That is everything that you need to know when it comes to our rule book. Make sure you're getting familiar with it. Make sure you understand it. More videos will be coming out soon. Eli is getting together a presentation, and either he or I will make a video about an update to our scouting. I'll give you a little hint. We're going to start implementing our own version of scouting and draft classes, and we're going to be using NCAA 14. It's pretty cool. So it's exciting. But he'll tell you more about that when we get there. Okay. Pay attention to the server. Keep up with everything that you need to keep up with. Thank you. God bless.